Thanks for viewing the Massachusetts Speech and Debate League presentation on judging public forum debate. This event is designed to be judged by people with no background in debate, including parents, educators, and members of the general public. This presentation explains the fundamentals of judging this debate format. After watching this presentation, you might want to seek out our material explaining electronic ballots using tabroom.com, taking notes during a debate round, also known as flowing, and a different type of high school debate called Lincoln Douglas debate. Public forum debate centers on a resolution. You will hear the same resolution debated in every round you judge at a tournament. Tournaments throughout the country use that resolution for 1 to 2 months. Public forum debate resolutions usually pertain to issues in the news. For example, resolved, the United States federal government should enact the Medicare for All Act of 2019, or resolved, the Supreme Court rightly decided that Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act violated the Constitution. Public forum debate pits two teams against each other, each of which has two students. The team arguing that the resolution is true is designated the pro. The team arguing that the resolution is false is designated the con. In a round, the arguments that you hear will consist of a series of links that lead to an impact. For example, here are some arguments you might hear on the Medicare for All topic. The pro, contending that Medicare for All is a good idea, might argue that Medicare for All would improve health. The first link in this argument is that by providing health insurance paid for by the government, Medicare for All would make healthcare more affordable. That in turn would lead to more people getting preventative care. And here's the impact: 68,000 lives saved each year. The con, contending that Medicare for All is a bad idea, might argue that it would hurt the economy. The first link in this argument is that to pay for the program, the government would substantially increase taxes. Much higher taxes would hurt economic growth. The impact would be the loss of 1 million jobs. In evaluating these arguments, you will evaluate the links, assessing how well they hold together, and weigh the impacts. That's the basic idea of what goes on in a debate round. Let's look at your task as a judge in more detail. As a judge, you have three jobs. First, you must decide which team won the round. Second, you must award speaker points to each of the four debaters. Finally, we ask that you provide written feedback to the debaters. Let's take a look at each of these three jobs in more detail. Your first job, deciding who won the round. There's a two-way deal here between you and the debaters. The first part of that deal is that the judge is always right. Whichever team you found to be more convincing is, by definition, the team that won. Remember, you are not expected to have prior debate experience or knowledge of the topic. So, if the debaters speak too quickly, or if they fail to explain their arguments well enough for you to understand their points, that's on them. It's the job of the debaters to adapt to you. The other side of the deal is that you must decide the winner based on what you hear in the round. To the extent possible, you must set aside your own knowledge of the topic and your own opinions. Even if you know that a point made by a debater is wrong, that point stands until the opponent successfully refutes it. Completely setting aside your beliefs and knowledge is an aspiration. As you decide a round, think about whether you are making arguments on behalf of one team that the other team cannot refute because they have not even heard them. Try to avoid inserting yourself into the round in that way. This deal between you and the debaters has a couple of implications. First, so-called dropped arguments, that is, arguments not responded to, are conceded arguments. If a team does not respond to an argument, you must assume that they do not have a response, even if a response seems apparent to you. And finally, during the round, the judge does not ask questions or make comments about the arguments. In a sense, your role is more like that of a juror than a judge. You listen and decide based on what you hear. Your second job is awarding speaker points. You will award a score to each of the four debaters. I'll be describing the scale we use at most Massachusetts tournaments. The scale used at the tournament where you are judging may differ a bit, so be sure to check out the details with your team coach or the tournament staff. Nonetheless, it will probably be similar to what I show you here. Now, the scale used at most Massachusetts tournaments runs from 25 to 30 points, and half points are allowed. For example, you can give a debater a score of 28.5. You do not need to memorize this scale because the information will be listed on the ballot you receive. But here's a quick description of how you can think about it. A 30 is an A++, truly amazing. 29 to 29.5 is an A- to an A. Fantastic. The debater went above and beyond. 28 to 28.5 is a B to B+. Very good. The debater got the job done. 27 to 27.5 is a C+ to a B-. Acceptable, but there's plenty of room for improvement. 26 to 26.5 is a C- to a C. Needs work. The debater appears to be a beginner or is woefully unprepared. At the bottom of the scale is a score of 25, which is reserved for debaters who are rude or unprofessional. Maybe the debater incessantly cut off their opponent at cross-examination or used derogatory language. If you award a 25, you must comment on your ballot to explain what happened. Next, let's talk about the criteria for awarding speaker points. Debate has no official rubric. We ask you to consider content. Here are three factors to think about. First, was the debater organized and easy to follow? Second, how well did the debater clash with the opposing arguments? Did they respond to all their opponent's arguments and explain why their own position on each point was more compelling? Finally, did the debater allocate their time well? Did they spend enough time on important points and avoid spending too much time on trivial points or unhelpful rhetoric? We ask that you avoid consideration of attributes the debater largely cannot control. For example, avoid considering how deep a debater's voice is or whether they speak with a stutter. I want to talk for a moment about low point wins. A low point win refers to a decision where the point total for the debaters on the winning team is less than the point total for the debaters on the losing team. For example, if Toby and Keith defeat John and Emma, but Toby and Keith earn a total of only 56 points while John and Emma earn 57 points, that's a low point win. Note, if the winning and losing teams have the same total points, that is not a low point win. Low point wins are rare. They should happen in only a couple of circumstances. First, if the clearly better team makes a small but crucial mistake that costs them the round, or if the team that wins the arguments in the round is extremely rude. At most, but not all tournaments, low point wins are allowed, but you must check off a special box on the ballot. That way, the people running the tournament know that you awarded a low point win purposely. Which takes us to your final job as a judge, providing feedback. It's okay to talk to the debaters after the round and tell them what you thought. If you do, please wait until after you have submitted your decision and your speaker points. Even if you talk to the debaters about your reasoning, it's also crucial to provide written feedback on your ballot. That way, they will remember what you said and their coach gets to see your feedback as well. The main focus of the feedback should be your so-called reason for decision. That is, your comments should focus on the arguments. When I write feedback, I like to provide a synopsis of how I saw the key arguments evolve on each side. What were the main points put forward by the pro? What were con's main responses? And how did I resolve the conflict? Same thing for the main points put forward by con. How did pro respond? And finally, how did I compare the impacts on each side? Let's go through an example of what a judge might write after hearing a round on the Medicare for All topic. The judge might start on the pro side, writing, Pro argued Medicare for All improves health by increasing preventive care. Con argues Medicare for All cuts payments to hospitals, undermining overall care. But pro successfully defends their position by pointing out that Medicare for All reduces administrative costs, making up for lower payments to hospitals. I buy pro's 68,000 lives per year impact. Con argues that Medicare for All raises taxes, costing 1 million jobs. And now here's where the judge compares the impact. But even if I grant Con's impact of 1 million jobs, pro's impact of 68,000 lives every year outweighs. So I vote pro. Okay, so we've talked about the judge's three jobs: decide the winner, award speaker points, and provide feedback. Now let's talk about what happens during the round. Let's call the team that speaks first Team A, and we'll assume that team is defending the pro. The team speaking second is Team B, and they are defending the con. Remember, there are two speakers on each team. We'll call them A1 and A2 on Team A, and B1 and B2 on Team B. So the first thing that happens is that the first speaker on Team A, that is Speaker A1 delivers a 4-minute case laying out the main arguments on their side. Then Speaker B1, the first speaker on Team B, B1 delivers a 4-minute case with the main points on their side. Then those two first speakers, A1 and B1, they engage in a 3-minute bi-directional cross-examination. That is, they take turns asking each other questions. Now it's the turn of the second speakers to speak. That's A2 and B2. So A2 gives a 4-minute rebuttal responding to the case that B1 just read. Then B2 responds to Team A. Note that speaker B2 can respond to both Team A's case and to the rebuttal delivered by A2. Then A2 and B2 engage in a 3-minute bi-directional cross-examination. Now, at this point, all four debaters have spoken. From this point onward, nobody should introduce any new arguments. The debaters instead sort out the points made in the cases and rebuttals. With all four debaters having spoken, it's also time for the first speakers to speak again. Each of the first speakers delivers what is called a summary speech. Each of the summary speeches lasts 3 minutes, and their purpose is to identify the main points on each side and explain why their side is winning those arguments. After the summary speeches, all four debaters engage in a 4-way cross-examination called Grand Cross. And finally, each of the second speakers gets a chance to conclude the debate, with each delivering a final focus speech. The final focus should go through what the main issues are in the round and make the case for why their side won those issues and why, all told, the impacts on their side outweigh the remaining impacts on their opponent's side. Done well, a final focus speech, it is said, will write the judge's ballot. In other words, ideally, the judge's reason for decision will resemble the final focus speech delivered by the winning team. Another thing to be aware of during the round is preparation time. Each team has a 3-minute prep time bank. As they use it through the round, that prep time bank runs down, sort of like in speed chess. Debaters can use their prep time before any speech. So if the pro is due to speak next and the two pro team debaters want to talk first, they can take prep time. If they take 30 seconds before rebuttal, they have 2 minutes and 30 seconds remaining. The good news is that unless you're watching inexperienced teams, the debaters will themselves keep track of their prep time, and they'll keep an eye on each other. That said, it's good for the judge to police prep time. Now, those are the highlights for what happens during the round. Now let's take a step back and talk about what happens before the round starts. First, there is the coin flip, which determines which team is pro and con and which team speaks first. Whichever team wins the flip gets to choose one of two things. If they want, they can choose the side of the resolution they want to defend, either pro or con. If they do not care which side they defend, they can choose to speak second, the position considered to be more advantageous because, among other things, the second speaking team gets the last word. Whatever choice the winner of the flip makes, the other team gets the remaining choice. The coin flip may be done with an actual coin, but it may also be done over the internet between the two teams, in which case, as a judge, you do not need to even think about it. Whichever way it's done, however, Before you start the round, be sure you know which team is which. Tell the teams what you have on your ballot. For example, I have Lake Placid speaking first on the pro and Keene Valley speaking second on the con. Is that right? The last thing you want to do is mix up the teams when you're voting. And finally, be sure you know the names of the debaters on each team and which one's speaking first and second, so that you can award individual speaker points to all 4 round participants correctly. We have a couple of things we ask you to remember. First, we would like judges to reflect on implicit bias. The research on communication suggests that many of us have pre-existing, often subconscious notions about what an effective and convincing speaker looks and sounds like. It could be someone who is tall and has a deep voice, for example, or it might be someone dressed in a certain way. The influence of these characteristics can bias your thinking in favor of a gender, a race, a social class, or some other group. We ask judges to strive to set aside those notions when deciding which team won, awarding speaker points, and providing feedback. As much as possible, please try to judge the debaters based on the content of their speeches and not on personal characteristics that they cannot or should not have to change. In that way, we can make this activity as educational as possible. And finally, please be encouraging. That will not always be easy. Sometimes kids come unprepared. Sometimes they're even rude, but they're learning. And the only way we can keep helping them to learn is to encourage them to come back and try again, even when they come up short. So, if a debater is unprepared, tell them that their passion was impressive and that next time they'll do better if they also have evidence. If they're rude, you might write on their ballot that they should avoid constantly speaking over their opponent and that you know they can do better. We hope that you enjoy your experience. You are an educator in this activity, and we cannot do it without you. Thank you again.